Imagine a company so powerful, it controlled half of every phone sold on Earth. And then imagine it disappearing in just 6 years. This is not imagination. This actually happened. In 2007, one company had 49% of the entire global phone market. If you bought a phone anywhere in the world, there was almost a 50% chance it was theirs. They sold 435 million phones every single year, more than Samsung, Apple, and Motorola combined. At one point, their value reached $303 billion. But in 2013, they sold their phone business for only $7.2 billion. That is less than what Facebook paid for just WhatsApp. The name of this company was Nokia. You have definitely heard this name before. At its peak, Nokia was so big it made up 4% of Finland's entire economy. One company supporting an entire country. The Nokia 3310 became a legend because it was so strong people still joke about it today. Over 126 million units were sold, and the Nokia 1100 is still the best-selling phone in history with 250 million sales. So what went wrong? On January 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs stood on a stage and showed the world something new. A small glass rectangle that would change everything. But that was not the only reason Nokia fell. There was something else. Something far more dangerous. A mistake inside the company. A culture that refused to see the truth. And a decision in 2011 that destroyed everything they had built. Today, we are going to understand the full story of Nokia. How it rose, how it fell, and what we can learn from it. Let us start from the beginning. The story of Nokia does not begin with phones. It begins with paper. On May 12, 1865, in a small town called Tampere in Finland, a man named Frederick Idestam built a simple wood pulp mill on the banks of a river. In 1868, he expanded to another town near the Nokian Virta River. That is where the name Nokia came from. For the next 120 years, Nokia was not a technology company at all. It made rubber boots, cables, paper chemicals, and electronics. It survived 2 world wars and Finland's civil war. It survived by making whatever people needed. No one had any idea it would one day become the most powerful phone company on Earth. Nokia spent over a century just trying to stay alive. But that survival instinct taught them something important, how to adapt. And that ability to adapt would one day create total dominance, but it would also become a trap. For 120 years, Nokia made cables and boots. Then in 1987, they made something completely different. A phone that ended up in the hands of Mikhail Gorbachev. In 1987, Nokia launched the Mobira Cityman 900, one of the first handheld mobile phones in the world. It weighed almost 2 pounds and cost thousands of dollars. But then something unexpected happened. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was photographed making a public phone call with one. The image spread globally. The device earned the nickname the Gorba phone. And suddenly Nokia, a Finnish company known for rubber boots and cables, was now linked to the future of communication. The phone was not a mass market product yet, but it was proof that Nokia could compete at the highest level. Then in 1992, a new CEO named Jorma Ollila made the most important decision in Nokia's entire history. He stripped the company of its paper, rubber, cable, and chemical divisions completely. He declared Nokia a pure telecommunications company. Finnish business analysts called it reckless. Ollila called it focus. For 127 years, Nokia survived by making many different things. Now Ollila was betting everything on one thing. It was a massive gamble, and he was about to be proven spectacularly right. Nokia had gone all in on telecom. Now they had to deliver. And what followed was the most explosive growth in consumer electronics history. The gamble worked. Nokia's profit went from negative in 1991 to $1 billion by 1995. And by 1999, it reached an astonishing $4 billion. The mobile phone revolution was sweeping across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. And Nokia was leading it. But what made Nokia different was not just technology, it was philosophy. Their phones were reliable, affordable, and beautifully designed. And they were nearly indestructible. While other companies chased flashy features, Nokia built phones that simply worked. Phones that survived drops, water, and years of heavy use. They were not selling technology, they were selling trust, and people all over the world trusted Nokia more than any other brand. By 1998, Nokia had overtaken Motorola to become the best-selling phone brand in the world. By 2000, their market value reached $303 billion. Nokia was not just the most valuable company in Finland, it was one of the most valuable companies on Earth. Nokia alone made up 4% of Finland's entire economy and over 20% of Finnish exports. A single company had become the financial spine of an entire nation. But the speed of Nokia's rise created a dangerous illusion. That dominance was permanent. The company that reinvented itself was about to become a prisoner of its own success. Nokia dominated the 1990s, but then they released a phone that would become legend. A device so indestructible it turned into a global meme that still exists today. In 2000, Nokia launched the Nokia 3310, a device that would become one of the best-selling electronics products in human history. Over 126 million units were sold worldwide. But the 3310 was not just a phone. It became a legend. People still joke about how indestructible it was. You could drop it, throw it, and it would still work perfectly. It became a global meme that exists even today, more than 20 years later. The 3310 was the phone everyone remembers. The phone that survived everything. The phone that defined an era. And then in 2003, Nokia released something even bigger, the Nokia 1100, the best-selling mobile phone model of all time. Over 250 million units sold globally. Think about that number for a second. 250 million people across the world chose the same phone. It was affordable, reliable, and built for everyone. From students in Europe to farmers in Asia, the Nokia 1100 was everywhere. By this point, Nokia did not just lead the market, they defined what a mobile phone was. The design, the interface, the way people thought about phones. Nokia had shaped all of it. At their peak in 2007, they controlled 49% of the global phone market. Out of every 2 phones purchased anywhere on Earth, one was a Nokia. They were not just a company, they were a global standard. The name Nokia meant trust, quality, and reliability in almost every country on the planet. They had never been stronger. But 2007 was not just the year of Nokia's peak. It was also the year everything changed. Because on January 9th, 2007, while Nokia was celebrating, a man in San Francisco held up a small glass rectangle and declared he was reinventing the phone. Nokia owned half the market. They sold 435 million phones per year. They had never been stronger, and they were about to face the only opponent that could destroy them. A completely different vision of what a phone could be. On January 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco, and he made an announcement that would reshape the technology industry forever. He held up a small glass rectangle with no physical keyboard and no buttons, just a touchscreen. He called it the iPhone. And in that moment, the countdown to Nokia's collapse began, even if Nokia's executives refused to believe it. Inside Nokia's headquarters in Espoo, Finland, the iPhone was dismissed almost immediately, and the way they dismissed it would prove to be fatal. Nokia's executives pointed out that the iPhone had no physical keyboard. Its battery life was inferior. It was locked to a single carrier, and it was priced way too high for mass market adoption. Meanwhile, Nokia's Symbian operating system already powered more smartphones than any other platform on Earth. By every conventional metric, Nokia was still winning, so they were not worried. But that was the biggest mistake they ever made. Because what Nokia's executives failed to understand was something critical. The iPhone was not a better phone. It was a completely different category of object. It was a pocket-sized internet computer that happened to make calls. Apple had changed the entire question. It was no longer which phone do you want. It was now which platform do you want to live on. Nokia was still answering the old question, while Apple had already moved to a new one. This is one of the most dangerous moments for any dominant company. When a competitor introduces something that does not compete directly, something that changes the rules entirely. Nokia kept measuring the iPhone by phone metrics. They should have been measuring it by computer metrics. By the time they realized the difference, it was already too late. Nokia dismissed the iPhone as a threat, but inside the company, some engineers knew the truth. They had been warning leadership for years that Symbian was becoming obsolete. Those warnings were ignored. Nokia's collapse was not caused by a lack of information. It was caused by a failure to listen. Internal engineers had been warning leadership as early as 2004 that Symbian was becoming obsolete. They said a full operating system overhaul was critically needed. The touchscreen revolution was visible on the horizon. The warnings existed. They were simply suppressed. And this is where things get really interesting. Later, academic research by INSEAD Business School revealed something devastating. Nokia's corporate culture had evolved into one where middle managers were afraid to deliver bad news to senior leaders. The more dominant Nokia became, the more difficult it became to challenge the narrative of success. Admitting problems felt like admitting failure. And in a culture of winners, failure was unacceptable. Nobody wanted to be the person who said we are losing. Nobody wanted to be the one who questioned the strategy of the most successful phone company on earth. So they stayed silent. This created what researchers called a catastrophic information blackout at the exact moment clear information was most desperately needed. Senior executives believed everything was fine because that is what they were told. The people who knew otherwise were too afraid to speak up. The company's greatest strength, its internal confidence, had become its greatest weakness. Nokia did not fall because no one saw the threat. Nokia fell because the people who saw the threat could not get the message through. The hierarchy that had executed flawlessly during the rise became a prison during the decline, filtering out the truth until only comfortable lies remained. The warnings were ignored. Symbian stayed. And by 2010, Nokia was desperate enough to try one last smartphone, a device that would prove just how far they had fallen. In 2010, Nokia launched the N8, a desperate attempt to reclaim the smartphone market. On paper, it looked impressive. A 12-megapixel camera that was genuinely best in class, premium aluminum construction, features that should have competed with the iPhone 4, but it ran Symbian, and that single fact doomed it. By 2010, smartphones were not about hardware specs anymore. They were about ecosystems. Apple's App Store had hundreds of thousands of applications. Android's ecosystem was growing explosively, and Symbian's app ecosystem was so weak that consumers rejected the N8 almost immediately. Not because the phone was bad, but because the platform was dead. Nobody wanted to buy a phone where they could not get the apps they needed. Nobody wanted to invest in a system that developers were abandoning. Think about it like this. You could have the best car in the world, but if there are no gas stations to fuel it, nobody will buy it. That was Nokia's problem. The N8 sold reasonably well by historical standards, but reasonably well was not enough anymore. Nokia's global smartphone market share continued to collapse. The company that had defined mobile phones was now releasing products that reviewers described as too late to matter. The hardware was fine, the software was a generation behind, and no one was building apps for a dying platform. The N8 represented Nokia's fundamental misunderstanding of what had changed. They kept trying to build better phones. Apple and Android were building better platforms. The competition had moved to a different battlefield entirely, and Nokia was still fighting the last war. The N8 failed to save Nokia, and in February 2011, a new CEO sent an internal memo so devastating that when it leaked, it crashed Nokia's stock and shocked the entire technology world. On February 11, 2011, a new CEO took charge of Nokia. His name was Stephen Elop. He was a former Microsoft executive and the first non-Finnish CEO in Nokia's entire history. And he did something that shocked everyone. He sent an internal memo to the entire Nokia staff. A memo so brutal, so honest, and so devastating that it became legendary in the business world. It was called the Burning Platform Memo. In the memo, Elop used a metaphor. He described a worker standing on an oil rig that is on fire. The worker has two choices: stay on the burning platform and die, or jump into the freezing water below and take a chance. And then Elop said that Nokia was standing on that same burning platform. He admitted that Nokia was losing to Apple from above, losing to Android from below, and unable to build its own complete ecosystem.
This was not a motivational speech. This was a public admission that Nokia was dying. The memo was supposed to be internal, but it leaked to the public, and when it did, Nokia's stock crashed immediately. The technology world was stunned. A sitting CEO had essentially admitted that his own company was on fire. But what Elop said next was even more controversial. Instead of building Nokia's own smartphone operating system, instead of adopting Android, which was already growing fast, Elop announced that Nokia would partner exclusively with Microsoft Windows Phone. Former Nokia executives have said publicly that they deeply regret not choosing Android. But at that moment, Elop believed Windows Phone was the answer. He was wrong. Nokia was about to bet its entire future on a platform the market had already shown it did not want. The burning platform memo admitted the crisis. But the Windows Phone decision would accelerate the collapse. It alienated developers. It killed existing products. And it placed Nokia's fate entirely in Microsoft's hands. The Windows Phone partnership was announced as Nokia's salvation. It became its death sentence.
The commitment to Windows Phone alienated the Symbian developer community overnight. It killed existing Nokia smartphone models before replacements were ready, and it placed the company's entire future in the hands of a platform that consumers had already rejected. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Nokia's global smartphone market share collapsed from 34% in 2010 to under 4% by 2013. Just think about that drop. From 1/3 of the market to almost nothing in just 3 years. The company burned through cash reserves at a rate that made collapse mathematically inevitable. 42,000 jobs disappeared through successive rounds of layoffs. Families lost their livelihoods. Communities that depended on Nokia were devastated. Nokia's stock lost over 90% of its peak value in less than 6 years. Investors who had trusted the company watched their fortunes evaporate. And then came the final blow. On September 3rd, 2013, Microsoft announced it was acquiring Nokia's entire mobile devices and services division for just $7.2 billion. Nokia had been worth $303 billion at its peak. It sold its phone business for roughly 2% of that value. The fall from the top was almost unimaginable. But the story does not end there. Microsoft's ownership proved to be equally disastrous. The Windows Phone strategy continued to fail. In 2014, Microsoft wrote down $7.6 billion of the Nokia acquisition. That is more than the purchase price itself. They had essentially wasted billions of dollars. By 2016, Microsoft abandoned the Nokia brand entirely. They shut down the mobile phone business completely and laid off the vast majority of the 25,000 Nokia employees they had inherited. The dream was over. Nokia's phone business was dead, but the company itself was not gone. Stripped of everything that had made it famous, Nokia began a quiet reinvention. And remarkably, it worked. Stripped of its phone business, but still holding its core network infrastructure and patent licensing divisions, Nokia began a transformation that most people never noticed. The company pivoted aggressively into telecommunications network infrastructure. In 2016, they acquired Alcatel-Lucent for $16.6 billion. This single acquisition transformed Nokia into one of the world's 3 dominant providers of mobile network equipment. Alongside Ericsson and Huawei, Nokia became a global powerhouse again, but this time in a completely different space. Under CEOs Rajiv Suri and later Pekka Lundmark, Nokia positioned itself as a global leader in 5G network infrastructure. The company won major contracts with carriers across the United States, Europe, and Asia. And here is where the irony becomes perfect. Nokia began signing deals to help build the very 5G networks that would power the smartphones that had once destroyed it. Think about that for a second. The company that lost to the iPhone is now building the infrastructure that makes the iPhone work. As of its full year 2025 financial report published on January 28, 2026, Nokia reported stable network infrastructure growth of 3% year-on-year, expanded gross margins of 48.1%, and a strategic target of 6 to 8% net sales growth between 2025 and 2028. The company is financially stable, operationally focused, and growing, not as a phone maker, but as the invisible backbone powering the world's wireless future. The Nokia story is not about technology. It is about the paralysis of success. the blindness that comes from being so dominant that being wrong becomes psychologically unbearable.